In this episode, we're going to take a look at what I think are the top 5 new features in terms of security and compliance in Microsoft 365 that you definitely need to know. What are they? How do they work? And as always, what can they do for you? Stay tuned. Greetings everybody, welcome back to my channel. Andy Malone, Microsoft MVP, as well as a Microsoft certified trainer. If this is your first time, a very warm welcome to you, and I really do appreciate you dropping by. If you do like what you see, hit that like button please, it really does help my channel. And just before we get going, I want to say a huge thank you to everyone who's helped me reach 9,000 subscribers. I really do appreciate it. I'm trying to build a quality learning resource here. Now, in this week's episode, I thought I'd take a look at what I think are some of the latest and greatest security features in Microsoft 365. So both security and compliance tools that I really think you do need to know about and implement. Now, if you've not subscribed to the channel, please go ahead, hit that subscribe button up there, ring that bell, and you won't miss out on the good stuff in the future. And as always, I love your comments, questions, and feedback, so please feel free to get them down below. So, I think without any more jibber jabber, I think it's about time we got started with the demos. So, hope you enjoy, and let's take a look. So kicking things off, here is my number 5. This is Microsoft Teams Enhanced Encryption. Now, you're probably aware of Facebook, the likes of WhatsApp, and so on, and you know that we now have, and in fact, many customers actually require it to have enhanced encryption. And what this means is it's essentially end-to-end encryption. The confidence knowing that nobody is listening in on your calls. Well, you can see that out of the box here, we have got essentially 3 different settings, and it doesn't really matter which one you click on because they can all be customized anyway. So if I go into, let's say, the global policy here, which is the default, you can see that end-to-end call encryption is it's enabled by default. But if you do want to disable it for one reason or another, or disable user overrides so that users can't disable it, then you can do that. Now, if you want to know more about end-to-end encryption, you can go here and it will take you through to docs.microsoft.com and it will tell you all about it. Now, typically, one reason why you don't want encryption on is if for one reason you're monitoring a user for, let's say, legal or compliance reasons. But it's not something I tend to agree with. Personally, I'm a big advocate of end-to-end encryption and privacy. So there you have it, enhanced encryption policies. So for my number 4 option, we're going to take a look at app governance, which is an addition to Cloud App Security, or as it's now known, Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps. So you can find this here in the Microsoft 365 Defender Admin Center, which comes part, of course, as Microsoft 365. And if I just scroll right down here, you can see that we've got in the security section, you've got Cloud Apps and App Governance. Now, my only critique of this here is that Defender for Cloud Apps is actually in the compliance portal and App Governance is in the security portal. Something doesn't quite ring right there, and hopefully maybe these 2 portals will tie up. But as a tool, I think it's really, really useful. So what it looks for, and as you can see here right in the overview, it looks at any apps that are overprivileged. Now, if you know Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps, one of the things it does is it looks at shadow IT. So when users install apps or download apps, typically it provides a risk score for applications. And what this is doing is it's looking for users who are downloading apps that require, let's say, OAuth or open authentication. And essentially, it's looking for things like overprivileged apps. So as I've said before, you download that, let's say, 10-pin bowling app from the App Store. But the 10-pin bowling app, why does it need access to your camera, your contacts, your microphone? That's not right. So again, having something like this is really, really useful and powerful. So basically what we do is we start off here in policies. And you can see that in essence, we've got a couple of kind of suggested policies. These are just kind of suggestions here. So you can create a new policy. You can create, for example, a secure app permissions policy or a regulate app policy. So I'm going to go into where it creates a new policy here. And you can see essentially what we have is a number of templates. So you can create a usage policy. So for example, that amazing app that suddenly everybody is downloading. Again, that might generate a little bit of alerts. It might say, you might want to do a bit of investigation on that. So again, increased in users or a new app with unusually high data usage. Again, you may want to investigate that. Also, things like apps that are, quite frankly, they're just overprivileged. They're asking for too much information, all right? So again, something like that would be very useful. Certification. So again, do you need an app to be certified within your organization? So again, you have an option here, but of course, you can also create a custom policy as well. So I'm just going to go ahead. I'm going to say let's say a sudden increase in users, and I'll call this increase in users. You can see you get a little description, and again you can set the severity level here as well. Now, do you want to apply the default settings or do you want to customize the app? And you can see that you can set the conditions. Now, the default setting is just this individual condition. But if you say no and you click next, you can then specify it. So is this for all apps or only for specific apps? Well, to be honest, I think the all apps option here is quite good. So do you want to apply the default conditions from the template? So you can see I can now, for example, this is the one from the template, but of course you can add in other conditions as well. And to be honest, there's a huge list of items that you could potentially bring in here, which are really good. So again, I could say overprivileged apps as well. So now that I've gone ahead and I've created that policy, I'm just going to go ahead and click next. And what do you want to do? So that's the condition. Now this is it's kind of a combination between cloud app security and conditional access. So what do you want to do? So if you get an app that suddenly everybody's downloading, but it's asking for just too many permissions, I definitely want to go ahead and disable that app in my organization. So I would go ahead, click on that policy option, and then click next. Now, do you want to just run this in audit mode, or do you actually want to run it in active mode? So again, audit mode might be useful just as a try before you buy type scenario. But when you're ready to go, then of course you can click on active, and that then switches on that policy. What I'm going to do is I'm going to switch it on auditing mode just to start with. So I get a nice review of everything here. Again, and am I ready to go? Yes, I am. And I can just click on submit, and my new policy is now created. So there you have it. App governance is an extension of Microsoft Defender for cloud apps in Microsoft 365. Now, for my number 3 option, I want to take you into the Compliance Center in Microsoft 365, or as it's now recently been rebranded, as the Microsoft Purview compliance portal. Oh, come on, marketing guys at Microsoft. Constant name changes is getting really confusing. The confusing thing for me is everything else is branded as Microsoft Defender. So you've got the Defender for Cloud Apps, Defender for Microsoft 365, and then they hit you with this one for compliance. It just doesn't stick with me, but that's just my opinion, Tell me what you think. Anyway, let's get to the point in question here. So first up, if I just flip to Exchange, one of the problems that we traditionally have in Exchange is mail flow. So if you're looking to control the flow of mail between, let's say, two departments or two locations, you can set up things like remote domains. You can set accepted domains. We can even create connectors to third parties, for example. And of course, you can set up mail flow rules. And we've had these in Exchange for years. But this is just for Exchange. What about the likes of Microsoft Teams? What about everything? Well, is it possible to control the flow between two departments and perhaps block it? And I got to thinking, yeah, well, actually, that's a really, really good question. And what we now have, if I just scroll right down here, and this is a really nice feature, is something called information barriers. And one of the first things, one of the purposes of information barriers is exactly that. It's to be a barrier between either two locations or two departments, perhaps to avoid, for example, a conflict of interest. So, for example, if you worked for a financial organization that had one department that, for example, had financial advisors, and you had another part of the organization that dealt with stocks and shares, again, there could be a potential conflict of interest. So what I've done here is I've just created two segments. So if I just show you the first segment here, let me just edit that. You can see that all I've done is I've just created a segment and I've called it to Oslo. I've called it equals sales. So basically the sales department within Oslo is one segment. I've then gone and created another option here, but instead of user group is a member of and the name of the group, what you can also do is you can use the actual ID of the group, which of course you can find in the properties of Azure Active Directory. So all I've done is I've just copied and pasted the group ID here. So now that I've created those segments, the next thing I want to do is obviously create a policy. And the policy is really simple. So I've just created a policy here, and you can see that it's basically banning communications between these two parties. So again, if I click onto the policy here, and if I click next, and you can see the drop down arrow, it only says either allowed or blocked. So what I've done is I've gone ahead, I've clicked on blocked, and I've said block Oslo. So there is no communications whatsoever. That's the huge difference here. So Teams, Outlook, any collaboration, SharePoint, OneDrive, and if a user tries to send communications, they will actually receive an error message. But it actually explains that for compliance reasons, communication has been blocked. Really useful and extremely powerful feature. So again, I've just clicked on switch that on, submit that, and I've now updated that policy. I can think of loads of customers that are actually going to use this. I think it's really useful. So once you've created that policy, the next thing then is if I just click into policy, just wait for this to finish. Okay, and there we go. So next I'm going to click on policy application. And now what I need to do is I simply just need to click on the policy itself and then just apply it. Now I've already done that, and you can see that that has now been applied. And there we have it. Information barrier policies. Absolutely awesome. Now, for my number 2 option, I want to take a look at Microsoft Purview admin roles. Now, you're probably thinking, Andy, we're well familiar with different administrator roles in Microsoft 365. And in fact, if I go into role assignments, I'm sure you'll be very familiar with this. Now, whether you manage these roles in Azure AD, in Microsoft Exchange, or Intune, and in fact, this is kind of new as well. You're starting to see much more categorization, I suppose, in roles. But there's one thing that's missing here. Now, if you are a compliance person, a compliance admin, then again, I'm sure you'll be familiar that you can go into the various compliance tools here. But in fact, you'll see that there's only a couple of things here, a compliance admin and a compliance data admin. But there's so much more than this. And for this to actually be seen, we need to actually go into the Compliance Center, or as it's now been rebranded, the Microsoft Purview Compliance Portal. And in here, you've now got this Permissions tab here. Now, you know what they say, no two admins are created the same, and this is very much the same. So again, these are your typical admin roles here, and then below here, you can view and manage specific tasks in the compliance portal. And what we're actually finding now is tools like things like privacy management, things like information protection, e-discovery especially, privileged subject access requests for content. These are now requiring not just regular global admin roles, but also these special compliance roles as well for compliance reasons. So what I'm just suggesting to you, and I'm going to actually come in or back into this in a future session and really go into this in deep dive and give lots and lots of demos. But for now, I think you need to be aware that you need to come into these roles, and you can see that each of the features, for example, it's not just compliance, but things like insider risk management. You've actually got multiple individual roles in here. And it's so important that you know what these are because, well, from an exam perspective, if you're planning to do any of the SC series of exams, or things like the MS 500 or AZ 500, then this is going to be important for you. We've also things like subject right request administrators, privacy management investigations, analysts, and so on. If you want to do things like, if I just come up to e-discovery, so similar previous thing, we've now got just a couple of changes this week, in fact. Advanced e-discovery has been rebranded to premium e-discovery. And we also have the user data search feature. Now, you can see that this is currently using the old portal, and this is going to be updated. So if you want to create a DSR case, so a data subject request case, so if this is part of the EU, the European GDPR directive, so if a user comes and says, hey, I need some of my data, please, can I export it out? You can put that request in, export that content out to the user. Now, again, other things like e-discovery, content search, you can go in and you can create the search, but you can't see the content because you don't have the rights to do that. You would need to give yourself one of these Purview admin roles in order to do that. So that's really important. Just on the subject, by the way, of user data search, we also have this new privacy subjects right requests here. Now, the gotcha with this, the big gotcha, is it's chargeable. And Microsoft have a number of different models. So you can do it on a pay per use, so a pay as you go, or you can purchase it in blocks of 10 or 100. And they are quite expensive. All right. So this is privacy subject rights requests as opposed to just users data subject request. They are quite different, so just be aware of that. And I'm going to do a later session on privacy management and exactly what it is. But for the moment, as I said, one of the things you definitely want to get familiar with, folks, is this concept of the different permissions. So the different admin permissions for the various compliance tools in the Purview Admin Center. Now, for my number one option, I want to take a quick look at what I think is an exciting glimpse into the future. And this is conditional access device filtering policies. Now, I'm going to go into Azure AD. I'm going to come down to conditional access, which of course is here in the security node. And in conditional access, I've covered this in many sessions before. Here is a policy that I've gone ahead and created. So I'm going to go into the policy, and something that's really exciting is ABAC, attribute-based authentication. We've seen it introduced with groups, dynamic groups, for example, and we're starting to see it more and more in things like conditional access, and you're going to start seeing it in user accounts. And it's one of the exciting aspects of this is it's very, very dynamic. So, of course, conditional access here, I basically said, okay, anybody in these particular groups who are using these particular apps must meet these conditions. So user risk, sign-in risk. But then we've got the device platform, and until previously, it was just, hey, if they're using an Android device, if they're using an iOS device, if they're using Windows, and that was it. It was very, very generic. And it was okay. But now what we're actually finding is that it's actually giving us a lot more detail. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll down here, and you can see that one of the new filtering options is filtering for devices. So I can go in here, and it's similar to dynamic groups in that it uses attributes. Okay, so we can choose something really simple here. I can say, yeah, okay, let's switch this policy on, and I can say, okay, if the device has a specific device ID, so perhaps you're using corporate IDs, device ownership, so is it a personally owned device or a corporate device? What's the manufacturer? I love this. So let's say, for example, if the manufacturer, let's say, contains or even actually equals, let's say HP. So HP, and then you can say, okay, let's add another expression, and you can say, or the manufacturer, let's say in this case, the manufacturer, let's just put this in here. Let's say the manufacturer equals, and we'll say Dell, and you could then, and you can see that the rule is being created here. So what is the potential here? Well, you could essentially say, hey, look, I'm going to allow users to connect to my organization, but they must only be using this particular manufacturer, this particular model, this particular operating system, and you can do if, and, or else. So you can create this really nice complex rule that essentially only these devices will get connected to your organization. Now, in terms of security, this is absolutely incredible, because not only have we now got things like multi-factor authentication for users, but you can now add this additional layer onto security. All right, so this is something that I'm super excited about, filter for devices. Now, another thing which is really nice, by the way, is that we've now got the conditional access templates, which are also in preview. And you can base those templates on devices. So again, there are a number of preset and pre-configured templates. I think that's awesome. and that's going to make our lives so much easier. So currently in preview, definitely check it out. So there you have it, my top 5. I know there are probably many more, but that's my top 5 features in terms of security and compliance that I think you need to get on board with and you need to switch on. Hey, listen, if you've enjoyed the video, I really do appreciate you hitting that thumbs up button, giving me a nice like. That really does help my channel. And if you've not subscribed, go ahead, click on the subscribe button, ring that bell, and you won't miss out on the good stuff in the future. And as always, your comments, questions, not just about this, but all of my other videos, I would really appreciate. Okay, thank you so much. And of course, you stay safe, and I'll see you next time. Take care. Hey, thanks so much for dropping by today. Here's a couple of videos that you may enjoy, and while you're here, go ahead, click on the subscribe button and you won't miss out.